Hello, WorldCiv106. Welcome to week 4. I knew that a lot of you would enjoy this last week's discussion, and that many of you also understand how this is relevant to many of your upbringings. And I see that a lot of you saw that this could be controversial, but I'm really just happy the way that everybody handled it in the discussions. And I've enjoyed, even looking at the notes that you have been writing down, and some of you write your own little thoughts or comments in there. So that's great. And I've had a few of you write me some questions regarding some of the topics. Now, in the discussions, I saw various points that people brought up that I was going to address in the discussions. But I've realized that many of you don't actually look at the responses after you've already kind of did your work. So I wanted to address a few things to clarify in this announcement. And then I want to remind you that we have a doubled up work week. It's a little bit trickier this week, so make sure you get on top of looking at the course objectives for this week, okay? So just really briefly, what I wanted to do is touch on a few things. One, the word Torah was very confusing for a lot of you, and with good reason. And what I'm going to tell you might add a little confusion, but I think you'll find it helpful if this is a topic that you're concerned about and really want to get down. The Hebrew word Torah means like law or instruction. Instruction is maybe a better way of defining it. For religious Jews, it can often be shorthand simply to say that to be involved with Torah study or to study Torah is to study everything that's around Jewish learning. That is often used in that way, and that's where it gets confusing, okay? Usually, there is a specific reference to the first 5 books of the Bible. That's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Okay? That's 5 books that are the beginning of the Bible. And by the way, the Torah and the Bible are the same thing. It's just that for Christians, and we're going to learn about Christianity later in this class, Christians add more books, which they call the New Testament. Jews do not read the New Testament. They do not acknowledge it as of having any authority. Okay? Now, Jews don't call their portion of the Bible the Old Testament. This is a Christian term. To say Old Testament implies that it's the past. The New Testament is where we need to focus on. And so for Christians, it's all inspired of God, but the New Testament now takes precedent. There's a passage in the New Testament where it talks about that Jesus put the Torah or the law was on with the cross with Jesus. And the way that Christianity explores within the gospel, within the accounts of Jesus and other Christian writers about the relationship that a Christian has with the Torah is a complicated one, which we will not get into right now. And I'd be glad to have a discussion with you at some time. But it is a complex one. So the bottom line is the Bible, the Jews often call the books that Christians all believe in and the Torah, the Tanakh. And that's basically the Hebrew Aramaic scriptures. And remember that the Jewish scriptures are mainly written in Hebrew, but also with Aramaic portions, which are very similar to the language of your Assyrian friends that we have in the Central Valley. Okay? I think I mentioned, I don't know if I can't remember if I gave an illustration. The word for spirit is ruach in Hebrew. In Assyrian or the Aramaic and the Syriac, it's rucha. Okay? So, very similar. Shlama for peace, shalom, peace in Hebrew. Okay, Shlama is the Aramaic. Okay, Shemeya, heavens in Aramaic, Shemayim in Hebrew. Okay, and Arabic words are very close to that as well, but I'm going to not focus on that for now. Also, sometimes, because it's the first 5 books, in Hebrew, the word for 5, Chumash, it's referred to as the Chumash, which is the first 5 books. Or, one you might have heard if you go to a church, is the Pentateuch. Now think about the word pentagram, meaning 5. Okay? It means 5 books, the first 5 books. So, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, that's what it is. And then the Jews have a tradition, the Orthodox Jews in particular, that when Moses was on Mount Sinai, God gave 2 Torahs. And he gave the Torah, that's the Bible here, that we have, that the Jews have up until the New Testament, with a little bit different order too, by the way. And then the one that's going to become the Mishnah, and by extension, the discussion of the rabbis. So the Talmud is the incorporation of the oral Torah, okay, according to Jews. Now, for Christians, just like the Jews do not accept the New Testament of the Christians do not accept the authority of the oral Torah. They don't believe in that as coming from God. And if you remember in the study, the Karaite Jews, coming from the Hebrew word Karaim, reading, the readers, they believe just in the Bible, not the New Testament, and not the Talmud. Okay? A little bit confusing. I realize, I'm sorry. And then the last thing I say is that in the New Testament, the Torah is often referred to as the law, nomos in Greek. Okay? And because in a sense, so essentially, Jewish living and the laws for Jewish life are in those first 5 books incorporated. And then the other books are called like the Nevi'im, or the prophets, or the Ketuvim, the books, the writings. Okay? The writings would be like Psalms, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, so forth. The Nevi'im would be like the prophets, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, okay, prophets. And those are our books that Christians would be familiar with as well. I'm trying to think if there's... I was going to read something out of here, but I think I'm taking up too much time. Needless to say, what I just wanted to point out is that if you're interested, I think I've shown this book in the other videos, but you can buy a Hebrew Aramaic scripture Bibles that have the commentaries and the notes of the way that the Jewish scholars incorporating the Talmud would interpret the scriptures. And you'll see, if you grow up Christian, that the way that the Jews have seen some of the passages in the Bible that we were familiar with growing up, actually they have a long different interpretation of some of those passages. And it's interesting, to say the least. So if you're interested in that, I encourage you to delve into looking at compilations. There are also books that just kind of give you cliff notes of Talmudic thought. So, okay, having said that, we're moving on for now. We will get into Christianity in great detail at some point, and we will cover Islam. And remember, some of you are confusing Islam with Israelite. Some of you are confusing things with Quran. Quran, the recitation, the holy book of the Muslims, is another revelation that comes, okay, that claims to come in the tradition of Moses as well, which you will be surprised, and we will talk about that. And those are all the things we will cover later on. Right now we're going into Persia, and then because we're in this cram course setting, we're going to focus then on India. It's a lot to cover this week, but I think you will find them all equally interesting. We're going to go over Zoroastrianism of Persia. And remember, Persia is ancient Iran, okay? This is very helpful in getting this kind of background information. India, we're going to go over Buddhism, Hinduism and Buddhism. Also extremely important and relevant. And I think you will be surprised as to where Buddha and Buddhism started from, because most of my students usually are, because they just don't have a really strong notion of its origins. Okay, so if you have any questions on any of these, anything, of course, let me know. I do work for 2 days in a row, again, as usual. Many more students are finding that texting me is working out well. On my breaks, I can get back to you quickly, and so I want to keep encouraging that, okay? And I hope you all have a very blessed week, and keep learning, and and I hope things are going smooth. And again, if they're not, hit me up and communicate with me, and we'll see what we can do.